one of the most famous soul singers in the world, had to rely on government health care to get by in her final days. This wasn't a one-time story. It's a pattern of shocking poverty that has plagued some of the most gifted R&B musicians in history. We're counting down 20 legends who created timeless music but met a tragic, penniless end. 1. Gregory Coleman. Many people are crazy about a specific 6-second drum solo from 1969. It comes from a song called Amen, Brother, by a group called the Winstons. The man playing that incredible funky drum beat was Gregory Coleman. To put it mildly, that solo, known as the Amen break, became one of the most important pieces of recorded sound in history. It was sampled and used to build the foundation of hip-hop and drum and bass music. You have heard it in thousands of songs, from N.W.A. to The Prodigy. So, the guy who created this legendary piece of music must have become a millionaire, right? The tragic truth is the exact opposite. What many overlooked is that Coleman never saw a single penny in royalties for his creation. The song was a B-side, and no one thought much of it at the time. He was just a session musician who was paid a small fee for his time in the studio. As his drum beat was making other people rich, Coleman's life went in another direction. He struggled to find steady work as a musician. Eventually, he found himself without a home, living on the streets of Atlanta, Georgia. The man whose rhythm became the backbone of entire genres of music died broke and homeless in 2006. A British DJ eventually raised over $30,000 for Coleman's estate, but it was far too late for the man himself. From a drummer everyone has heard but almost no one knows, we move to a man who was one of the most famous entertainers in the world. A true superstar who could do it all, yet still ended up owing millions to the taxman. 2. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was a force of nature. He was a singer, a dancer, an actor, and a comedian. As a key member of the legendary Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, he was the definition of cool. He recorded R&B hits, starred in movies, and was a headliner in Las Vegas for decades. The man was a whirlwind of talent and charisma, and he made a tremendous amount of money during his long career. But the thing nobody tells you is that Sammy had a big problem with spending. He was known for his incredible generosity, often giving lavish gifts and huge amounts of cash to friends, family, and even strangers. He also spent a fortune on his own lifestyle. Unfortunately, he wasn't paying close enough attention to his taxes. For years, he simply didn't pay what he owed to the government. When he passed away in 1990, the world was shocked to learn the truth. Sammy Davis Jr. was in debt to the IRS for over $5 million. That would be more than $11 million today. The debt was so large that his wife had to auction off nearly all of his personal belongings and memorabilia to help pay it down. The man known as Mr. Show Business left behind almost nothing but a massive bill. Sammy's debts came from the taxman. But the next musician's problems came from something much more basic: the heartbreaking inability to see a doctor when he got sick because he simply could not afford it. 3. David Williams. You might not know the name David Williams, but you absolutely know his guitar playing. He was one of the most in-demand session guitarists in the business. His funky rhythmic style was a key ingredient on some of the biggest hits of all time. He played on Michael Jackson's albums Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. He also backed up stars like Madonna, Stevie Nicks, and Aretha Franklin. He was the secret weapon behind countless R&B and soul classics. Session musicians like David are usually paid a flat fee for their work in the studio. They don't get the big royalty checks that the main artists do. While he made a decent living during his peak years, the money wasn't guaranteed to last forever. What many overlooked is that he, like many freelance musicians, did not have health insurance. In the mid-2000s, his health began to fail. He was suffering from high blood pressure, and in 2009, he had a major stroke. Without insurance, he couldn't afford the hospital treatments he desperately needed. His family and friends tried to raise money to help, but it wasn't enough. David Williams the man whose guitar powered some of the world's greatest hits, passed away at the age of 58, a victim of a system that left him with no resources when he needed them most. Williams played for the biggest stars, but our next artist was one of the biggest stars in the world, a true prince of soul, whose life came to a heartbreaking end inside his own family home. 4. Marvin Gaye. When you think of classic R&B, the name Marvin Gaye is one of the first that comes to mind. He was the soulful voice behind Motown hits like I Heard It Through the Grapevine, What's Going On, and Let's Get It On. He was a musical genius, a handsome and charismatic performer who could write songs that made you dance and songs that made you think. He was, without a doubt, one of the most important artists of his generation. But behind that smooth voice was a man in deep turmoil. The thing nobody tells you is that Marvin Gaye spent years struggling with his own personal demons. He battled with serious substance abuse issues that cost him a fortune. He also went through 2 very expensive divorces that drained his finances. To make matters worse, he was in a constant battle with the IRS over unpaid taxes. By the early 1982, his financial situation was a complete disaster. He declared bankruptcy and, to escape his debts, he moved to Europe for a few years. Even after a successful comeback with the hit song Sexual Healing, he was still broke. When he passed away tragically in 1984, his estate was found to be insolvent. This means he had more debts than assets. The Prince of Motown had no will, no life insurance, and no savings, leaving behind a legacy of brilliant music but a financial catastrophe. Marvin's troubles tore his family apart, but for the next legendary voice, her troubles followed her to the very end, leaving her with a shocking debt that was bigger than most people's lifetime earnings. 5. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was known simply as The Voice, and for good reason. Her powerful, soaring vocals were a gift to the world, making her one of the best-selling artists of all time. Hits like I Will Always Love You and I Wanna Dance with Somebody turned her into a global icon. She sold over 200 million records worldwide, starred in hit movies like The Bodyguard, and earned a fortune that most people can only dream of. You see, for all her incredible success, Whitney was fighting a long and difficult battle with substance abuse. This struggle had a devastating impact not only on her amazing voice, but also on her finances. Her unhealthy habits were incredibly expensive to maintain. On top of that, as her reliability wavered, she started to lose out on high-paying gigs and endorsements. She was still spending money like a superstar, but the superstar income was no longer flowing in. When she tragically passed away in 2012, the world was stunned to learn the state of her finances. Reports claimed that Whitney Houston was not just broke. She was in massive debt. Some sources estimated that she owed as much as $20 million to her record label and other creditors. The woman who had once signed a $100 million contract had an estate that was worth less than her enormous debts. Whitney's voice was a global treasure, but our next singer's voice was one of the first to truly define the sounds of jazz and blues, yet she passed away with less money in her bank account than a single movie ticket costs today. 6. Billie Holiday. Lady Day, as she was known, was a true musical pioneer. Billie Holiday's voice was one of a kind. It was full of emotion, pain, and a deep, soulful beauty. She didn't have the powerful range of other singers, but she had a way of phrasing a lyric that was pure genius. Songs like Strange Fruit and God Bless the Child were not just hits, they were powerful social statements. She changed the art of singing forever, but her life was one of constant struggle. The thing nobody tells you is that from a young age, she faced incredible hardship. As an adult, she fell into a pattern of substance abuse that would follow her for the rest of her life. She also got into terrible, abusive relationships with men who took advantage of her and stole her money. To make matters worse, she was relentlessly targeted by government authorities for her personal habits. She earned a lot of money in her career, but it was quickly taken by managers, agents, and her own expensive lifestyle. When she was on her deathbed in a New York hospital in 1959, she was under arrest, with police guarding her room. After she passed away, the world learned the heartbreaking truth. Billie Holiday had just 70 cents in her bank account. All she had to her name was $750 in cash that was found strapped to her leg. Billie Holiday was a victim of her time, but our next artist became the biggest star on the entire planet, a true king of his genre, yet he was hiding a secret debt so massive it was almost beyond belief. 7. Michael Jackson. He was the king of pop, an artist whose R&B roots helped him become the most famous person on earth. Michael Jackson's album Thriller is the best-selling album of all time. His music, his dancing, and his electrifying stage presence changed pop culture forever. He earned hundreds of millions, possibly even billions, of dollars over his career. He owned a massive ranch called Neverland, filled with amusement park rides and a zoo. He seemed to have limitless wealth. But what many overlooked was his spending. To put it mildly, his lifestyle was extravagant. He spent fortunes on art, antiques, and charity. But there was another, darker side to his expenses. In his later years, Michael faced very serious and very public legal battles. These court cases cost him tens of millions of dollars in legal fees and settlements. At the same time, his income was not what it used to be. The massive stadium tours and record-breaking album sales were behind him. He was borrowing huge sums of money just to maintain his lifestyle and pay his bills. When he passed away in 2009, just before a planned comeback tour, it was revealed that Michael Jackson was in debt to the tune of around $500 million. His estate was initially insolvent, and it took years of careful management and new deals to finally get it back into the black. Michael's spending was the stuff of legend, but the next Queen of Soul's downfall came from a very different kind of struggle, one that left her depending on public assistance during her final days. 8. Etta James. Etta James was the definition of a powerhouse vocalist. Her voice was raw, gritty, and full of soul. She could belt out a rock and roll tune 1 minute and then break your heart with a bluesy ballad the next. Her signature song, At Last, has become one of the most iconic love songs ever recorded. She was a true legend, a Grammy winner, and a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But her life off stage was marked by chaos and struggle. For decades, Etta James fought a fierce battle with substance dependency. This fight not only took a toll on her health, but also on her finances. What many people don't know is that the money she made from her music often went straight to supporting her habits. She also had a reputation for being a difficult artist to work with, which sometimes cost her lucrative opportunities. In her later years, she faced serious health problems that required expensive, round-the-clock medical care. She had not saved enough money to cover these costs. The situation became so dire that the woman with the multi-million-dollar voice had to rely on Medicaid, a government program for those with low income, to pay for her care. When she died in 2012, her sons were fighting in court over control of her very small estate. Etta James had to rely on government help. But our next artist was the daughter of royalty, yet she too found herself in a desperate financial situation after fighting her own personal demons. 9. Natalie Cole. Natalie Cole was born into music royalty. Her father was the legendary Nat King Cole, one of the smoothest and most beloved singers of all time. But Natalie was a star in her own right. She burst onto the R&B scene in the 1,970 seconds, with hits like This Will Be an Everlasting Love and Our Love. She had a powerful voice and a commanding stage presence, winning multiple Grammy Awards. The thing nobody tells you is that with fame came immense pressure, and Natalie soon found herself in the grips of a severe addiction. Her personal struggles became very public and nearly destroyed her career and her life. During this dark period, she burned through the fortune she had earned. She later wrote in her autobiography that she spent huge amounts of money to support her habit. leaving her nearly penniless. She managed to make one of the most incredible comebacks in music history with her 1991 album Unforgettable with Love, where she famously sang a duet with her late father's recorded voice. The album was a massive success and made her wealthy once again. However, the years of substance abuse had taken a toll on her health, and she faced expensive medical issues later in life, including a kidney transplant. While she was not destitute when she passed in 2015, the cost of her recovery from addiction and her later health battles had a significant impact on the fortune she had worked so hard to rebuild. Natalie Cole fought hard to regain her life and career, but our next artist, a trailblazing singer and actress, found her career sabotaged and her finances ruined by the very people who were supposed to help her. 10. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge was a true trailblazer. She was a stunningly beautiful and incredibly talented singer and actress. She started her career singing in clubs with an R&B and jazz style, but she is best remembered for her acting. In 1954, she became the first African-American woman to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress for her role in the movie Carmen Jones. She was a glamorous star who seemed destined for greatness. But in the Hollywood of the 1950 seconds, a black leading lady faced enormous obstacles. What many overlooked is that she was denied many roles because of her race. Her career began to stall. At the same time, her personal life was falling apart. She was the victim of terrible financial advice and abuse. Her managers and advisors mishandled her money, investing it in bad deals that lost her entire fortune. She was forced to declare bankruptcy and lost her beautiful Hollywood home. She tried to make a comeback, but the momentum was gone. In 1965, her life came to a tragic end. She passed away from what was ruled an accidental overdose of medication she was taking for a foot injury. When she died, Dorothy Dandridge, the woman who had once been on the cover of magazines and nominated for an Oscar, was completely broke. Dorothy's story is one of stolen potential, while our next artist was a beloved balladeer whose smooth voice hid his own private health and financial struggles that only came to light near the end. 11. Luther Vandross. When it came to romantic R&B ballads, Luther Vandross was the undisputed king. His voice was like velvet, smooth, rich, and full of emotion. For more than 2 decades, he created an incredible string of hits, including Here and Now, Power of Love, Divided by Love Power, and his famous cover of A House Is Not a Home. He sold over 40 million records and was a constant presence on the radio. He was the voice of love for a whole generation. Luther was a very private person. He rarely discussed his personal life or his health, but behind the scenes, he was dealing with serious health issues. He struggled with his weight for most of his life and had both diabetes and hypertension. These conditions are very expensive to manage over many years. In 2003, he suffered a major stroke that left him in a wheelchair and unable to sing again. The medical costs associated with his care for the last 2 years of his life were enormous. The thing nobody tells you is that while he was still a wealthy man by any normal standard, these hidden health costs and a very generous lifestyle meant that his estate was not as large as people expected. When he passed away in 2005, he left behind a modest estate, much of which was likely used to settle any remaining debts from his extensive medical care. Luther's health issues created hidden debts, but for our next artist, the Ivory Queen of Soul, her debts were much more public, stemming from battles with the very industry that made her a star. 12. Tina Marie. Tina Marie was a one-of-a-kind talent, a white singer who was so soulful that she was signed to the legendary Motown Records. She became known as the Ivory Queen of Soul. She was taken under the wing of funk legend Rick James, and together they created classic R&B hits. On her own, she scored major successes with songs like Lover Girl and Ooh La La La. She was a gifted singer, songwriter, and producer. But Tina was also a fighter. Early in her career, she got into a major legal battle with Motown. She wanted to leave the label, but they refused to release her or release her new music. The case went to court and resulted in a landmark ruling, often called the Tina Marie Law, which made it illegal for a record company to keep an artist under contract without putting out their albums. She won the legal fight. But what many overlooked is that these kinds of battles are incredibly expensive. This, combined with later career ups and downs and the costs of managing her health, left her in a difficult financial position. When she passed away suddenly in 2010, it was reported that she had unresolved debts. The woman who fought for artists' rights found herself another victim of the tough financial realities of the music business. Tina Marie fought the system, but our next artist, the son of another R&B legend, found his finances strained by legal issues of a more personal and familial nature. 13. Gerald Levert. Gerald Levert had R&B music in his blood. He was the son of Eddie Levert, the lead singer of the legendary group the O'Jays. Gerald first found fame as the lead singer of the group Levert, which had hits like Pop, 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 Goes My Mind. He then launched a very successful solo career, becoming known for his powerful, passionate voice on songs like Baby Hold On To Me and Private Line. He was a talented songwriter and producer, working with many other artists. He made a lot of money and was known for his generous spirit, often helping out friends and family. But that generosity sometimes led to problems. You see, his life was complicated by a series of lawsuits and personal disputes that were a constant drain on his finances. There were paternity suits and other legal entanglements that cost him a great deal of money in legal fees and settlements. These private battles, combined with a lifestyle that included supporting a large extended family, put a major strain on his resources. When he passed away in 2006 from an accidental overdose of prescribed and over-the-counter medications, he was still a major star, but his estate was reportedly facing significant financial strains that surprised many of his fans. Gerald Levert's life was cut short by a tragic accident. But our next artist made a heartbreaking choice after years of battling depression and the financial droughts that came with a stalled career. 14. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman was a truly breathtaking performer. She was tall, elegant, and possessed a deep, powerful voice that could handle jazz, soul, and R&B with ease. She was a commanding presence on stage and in the studio. She is best known for hits like You Know How to Love Me and her stunning performance on the song Betcha by Golly Wow with Norman Connors. She was a critical darling and a beloved figure in the soul music community. But the thing nobody tells you is that for much of her life, Phyllis Hyman suffered from severe depression and bipolar disorder. This made the ups and downs of the music industry incredibly difficult for her to handle. When her career hit slow periods and the hit records weren't coming, it had a major impact on her mental health and her finances. She struggled to find consistent work that paid what she was worth. The financial pressure added to her emotional turmoil. She felt undervalued by the music industry and was frustrated by her lack of mainstream success. In 1995, after years of these private battles, she made a tragic and desperate final act. She ended her own life just hours before she was scheduled to perform at the Apollo Theater. In a note she left behind, she wrote, "I'm tired. I'm tired." Her passing revealed a story of an artist who was broken by a business that couldn't see her true value. Phyllis Hyman's story is one of deep emotional and financial pain. Our next artist was also a musical genius, whose mental health struggles contributed to his early and tragic end. 15. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was a musical genius. There is no other way to put it. His voice was pure, soulful, and incredibly expressive. He was a brilliant songwriter, a masterful keyboard player, and a gifted arranger. He gave the world timeless songs like A Song for You and The Ghetto. His duets with Roberta Flack, like Where Is the Love and The Closer I Get to You are some of the greatest of all time. But what many overlooked was that Donnie was fighting a serious battle with his mental health. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, a condition that caused him to have severe bouts of depression and delusions. This made it very difficult for him to handle the pressures of fame and to work consistently. He had to be hospitalized several times. His treatments were expensive, and his inability to tour or record regularly meant his income was unpredictable. His finances suffered greatly as a result. In 1979, at the age of just 33, his life came to a shocking end. He was found on the ground below the 15th floor window of his New York hotel room. While his career was on an upswing at the time, his personal life was still in turmoil, and he left behind debts related to the high cost of his mental health care. Donny Hathaway's struggles were with his own mind, but our next singer faced a different kind of health battle, one that drained all her resources despite having one of the most famous songs of the 1,970 seconds. 16. Minnie Riperton. Minnie Riperton had a voice that was truly an instrument. She was famous for her incredible 5-octave vocal range, which allowed her to hit stunningly high notes in what is known as the whistle register. Her 1,975 hit song, Lovin' You, is a perfect showcase of this amazing talent. The song was a #1 hit all over the world and made her an international star, but just 1 year later, in 1976, she received a devastating diagnosis. She had breast cancer. At the time, the prognosis for this disease was not as hopeful as it is today. You see, Minnie was a fighter. She became one of the first celebrities to speak openly about her diagnosis, becoming a spokesperson for the American Cancer Society. She continued to record and tour, even while undergoing difficult and expensive treatments. In the 1,970 seconds, health insurance was not always great, and the costs of fighting a major illness like cancer could quickly wipe out a person's savings. When she passed away in 1979, at the young age of 31, she had used up most of her fortune paying for her medical care. She left behind a legacy of beautiful music, but very little money. Minnie Riperton's fortune was lost to a health crisis. Our next artist, one half of a legendary Motown duo, also had her life and finances cut short by a tragic illness. 17. Tammy Terrell. Tammy Terrell was a rising star at Motown Records in the 1,960 seconds. She was beautiful, vibrant, and had a voice that was sweet yet strong. She was a successful solo artist, but she became a true legend when she was paired with Marvin Gaye. Together, they recorded some of the most beloved duets in music history, including Ain't No Mountain High Enough and You're All I Need to Get By. They had incredible chemistry and were poised for even greater success, but their partnership was cut short by tragedy. In 1967, while performing on stage with Gaye, Tammy collapsed into his arms. Doctors discovered that she had a malignant brain tumor. For the next 3 years, she bravely endured multiple surgeries and treatments as she fought for her life. What many people don't know is that these medical procedures were incredibly expensive, and they completely drained her finances. Her illness left her unable to perform or record, so there was no money coming in. Motown reportedly helped with some of the bills, but it wasn't enough. When she passed away in 1970, at just 24 years old, Tammy Terrell had no estate to speak of. Her bright future was stolen by illness, which also took every dollar she had ever earned. Tammy Terrell was a teen star whose life ended too soon. Our next artist was also a teenage sensation, the original boy band leader, whose life took a dark turn that left him penniless. 18. Frankie Lyman. Long before the Jackson 5 or New Edition, there was Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. In 1956, a 13-year-old Frankie Lyman became an overnight sensation with the smash hit Why Do Fools Fall in Love? His high, innocent voice and charming stage presence made him one of the first black teen idols. The group was a huge success, but it didn't last long. Frankie soon left the group for a solo career that never took off, but his biggest problem was a personal one. The thing nobody tells you is that at a very young age, he got involved with dangerous substances. By his late teens, he had a serious dependency problem that would control the rest of his short life. Any money he made was quickly spent. He tried to make several comebacks, but his personal issues always got in the way. He lost his home and was in and out of trouble. In 1968, at the age of 25, he was found in his grandmother's bathroom. His life tragically cut short by his long-standing addiction. The boy who had once been on top of the music world died with absolutely nothing. Frankie Lyman's solo career failed to launch, a fate that also befell our next artist, whose famous falsetto voice couldn't save him from obscurity after he left his legendary group. 19. Philippe Wynne. If you've ever listened to the classic 70-second soul group The Spinners, you have heard the magical falsetto voice of Philippe Wynne. You can spell his name Phil-Up Wynne. He was the lead singer on some of their biggest hits, like Could It Be I'm Falling in Love and The Rubber Band Man. His incredible vocal improvisations at the end of their songs, known as the Philippe, were his signature move. He was a dynamic and unforgettable frontman. In 1977, Wynne decided to leave the Spinners at the height of their fame to start a solo career. He believed he was destined for even bigger things on his own. Unfortunately, it was a huge miscalculation. His solo albums failed to sell, and he quickly faded from the public eye. What many overlooked is that without the fame of the Spinners, he struggled to find work. He ended up playing small clubs for very little money. The man who had once sung in front of thousands was now performing for just a handful of people. In 1984, while performing at a nightclub in Oakland, California, he suffered a massive heart attack on stage and passed away. The great voice of the Spinners died, broke, and in relative obscurity.